thank you very much. It's such a great honor to be here. And thank you very much, Mark, for the invitation. I'm truly honored to be part of this great network, and then also be able to share a little bit about the research that we're doing. I'm going to share my screen. As was mentioned, I'm Dr. Savage. I'm currently an assistant professor at Northeastern University, and I also collaborate with the National Autonomous University of Mexico, UNAM. Today, we're going to learn a little bit about my research on using AI, creating AI-enhanced systems to combat polarization. And I'm going to go with a particular example about how we've been able to use AI to combat polarization. And the first thing that we should understand are data voids. So maybe write in the chat if you've heard about the term data voids. Overall, a data void is when there is limited information online about a particular topic. So for example, maybe let's say that there's limited information online about what the drug cartels are doing around healthcare for indigenous communities. And so this is a very specific topic that maybe if you search online, there is limited information available about that topic. And so what can happen when there is a data void is that search engines and also now these AI systems that exist and are also retrieving information for the end users, they're going to struggle to retrieve reliable information, given that there is so limited. Maybe nobody has written about what the drug cartels are doing, if they're doing anything with respect to healthcare of indigenous communities, these rural communities in, for example, Latin America. Now, what's interesting to understand is that these data voids can be exploited by bad actors to create polarization. So what they do is that given that there is so little information about that particular topic, they can then narrate the story however they want. So for example, they can create polarizing polarizing content that might not be at all true. But given that there is limited information for people to verify, people cannot easily say, oh, you know what, this article is completely bogus. It's not true that this is happening. And so, for example, in the case of, they could then, given that they identify, okay, there is very limited information about drug cartels and how they're handling healthcare for indigenous communities, they could then write, for example, articles saying that, oh, the drug cartels have been able to manipulate the indigenous communities to get them to participate with them, and the indigenous communities accepted because they want this new healthcare. And now look, they're terrorizing our cities. They're creating a lot more violence. And so this can create a polarization where now, for example, maybe citizens in a big city can now look down on the indigenous communities because they think that the indigenous communities are the ones that are creating a lot of violence and a lot of problems in their city, when maybe the indigenous communities have played absolutely no role. And so this is a way in which data voids can be exploited by bad actors to promote their agenda and create polarization between citizens. And so part of what my research has been focusing on is, okay, you know what, let's create AI systems that can, we started to think about, okay, how do we combat this? And so we argue that a way to combat this is by creating AI systems that can help journalists be able to identify potential data voids that exist online, and then can guide the journalists to be able to create reliable content about those particular topics. So this on one hand helps the journalist to be able to be more, they're now covering, for example, information that nobody else is covering. So that gives the journalist an enhancement. Because a lot of times the journalists want to be unique around the stories that they're creating. And then on the other hand, this also helps the information ecosystem, because now you have more reliable information about that particular topic, so the bad actors cannot as easily exploit it. And so here's a video about a system we made. This was done with my former PhD student, Claudia Flores Saviaga. She's now working in Meta's oversight board. And so basically this system, for example, it uses AI in order to kind of gather all of the information that exists online about a particular, like what currently exists when we think about a particular topic. And it helps also the journalist to identify where are the voids that exist. So there, for example, they can also look at it based on political leanings. So for example, maybe let's say that part of the data void is about, let's say, healthcare and indigenous communities and the drug cartels, and our system detects, hey, you know what? This topic is primarily covered by more conservative media outlets, and we have no content related to more liberal media outlets. And so that's an opportunity for covering that data void and providing that other perspective. And then here also on the right, you can see, for example, that the journalists can also collaborate with other journalists to have discussions about how they're going to create the article together, to collaborate, to address that data void. And overall, what we did was that we're using AI in the background in order to organize the data, and then we're creating data visualizations that help the journalists be able to more easily make sense about the data that they're observing so that they can take action and start to write articles that can cover those data voids. And so overall, my research has focused on designing these human-centered AI systems that can address, in this case, polarization problems. So what we do in order to accomplish this is we analyze first what is happening in the ecosystem. So for example, in this case, we identified, okay, we have this problem about the data voids. And then we start to think about how might we create a system, for example, an AI system that can address that problem. And then we build the system and then we evaluate it. We run user studies. So through our user study, we were able to identify that we were able to cover a number of different data voids that existed. And also this led people to believe that the information ecosystem was much more vibrant and complete because we were able to cover those data voids through our AI system in collaboration with the journalist. And here it's also very important to have interviews with people to really understand, for example, how they're viewing the system, also their needs. And through this type of collaboration, through these interviews, you can better understand how are people, for example, being polarized by a particular phenomenon that is happening and how you can address it. And so I think here it's very important to have this type of collaboration where you have also quantitative, for example, people working in computer science with people that work in more qualitative studies. Well, that's all for today. And thank you very much again for the great invitation and also the great organization of the event.